All right. Good evening, my dear friends. Do 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 do. It's Friday Night Fights. Tournaments start on the hour, as they do every Friday. Every Friday night we fight. All right. I'm going to attend to one or two things. See you all soon. Welcome, welcome. The XLAM fight works here. And here we'll go. Chess.com. We'll show the clubs. Chess Dojo Club. See if we can send that link out on YouTube. And here we go. Upcoming events. Current events. Upcoming events. All right. Qu'est-ce qu'il y a, chérie? Il y a quelque chose qui fait un peu peur. Oh, wow. Wow, quelle aventure, hein? Il vole à l'envers dans... Wow, il fait très froid, lui. Elle préfère tomber, hein?
Than getting eaten, Dad.
Ah non, ça fait main point père. Tu as fait un puzzle avec ces personnes, n'est-ce pas, Zen? Il faut qu'on regarde le deuxième film ce week-end.
Yes.
Parce que notre abonnement va terminer la semaine prochaine.
Or not. That's a good way to do it. I was gonna say, do you expect to see something different or all of that?
Ça aussi. Okay. Good evening, friends. Again, hey, Uddy the Broker. Let's tweet that the tournament's going on. Oh, je fais mon programme d'échecs, les chéris. Okay, what's happening?
They don't know that is trolls.
Four, four, two, two, four, three. 4, 4, 2, 2, 4, 3, 5. Hey, good night, Lauren. How are you? Correct, Alyechin's cat. Good day, Alvin. Yes, Alyechin's cat. When we're playing, we should close the stream or at least mute it, put it in the background, just focus on your game. And listening to my commentary could be thought of as cheating. It's also distracting. I hope at least like the noises I make are at least a little bit distracting. So yeah, so it wouldn't be good. You know, by the same token, anything that would distract you is not recommended, right? It's not best for you. So all right, let's see if we've got folks lined up for the tournaments already, huh? The 1600 section already's got a full group. Let's check the under section. Oh, I'm doing quite all right, thank you. All right, Alyechin's cat's in there waiting for a game. Excellent. And we need one more player only under 1600, and we'll be good. Hey, Hokey Gamer, welcome. Good to see you here. Oh yeah, I'm in tip-top shape. I was back at the gym today. All good. And yeah, today I wrapped up my coverage of the Maya International, right, with Kostya, Matt, Rachel, and Anushka playing. They've still got one more game tomorrow morning, and I think Kostya has somebody else covering that match or that round on Dojo. So for those of you who are up at, I think it's 2 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Portugal local time, for those of you who are up around then, you'll be able to catch round 9 of that tournament. Kostya has fought his heart out. Gosh, he should hopefully finally get a grandmaster, right? For all his trouble, he's fought so hard. It'd be fun to play a grandmaster in Portugal. We'll see though what the pairing is. I don't know yet. And yeah, it's kind of where things stand here with the dojo this Friday. Sure, Armoda, I give you permission to play the under 1600 section. There are multiple people rated 1500, so you probably get one of them. Hokey Gamer, maybe I'll address you personally, since right now you're the top seed in the under 1600 group. So if this fellow Armoda, a gender fella, I don't know their gender, right? But anyway, if this fella, I don't know if fella is a word you can use for men and women, etc. But if this Armoda character, who's rated 1630, joined your tournament, would you mind potentially being paired with somebody rated 1630 for your game? Because normally it pairs people, number 1 versus number 2, number 3 versus number 4 to have the closest possible matchups. They're just saying over on YouTube that it's 11 o'clock for them, so they don't want to play the full 90 plus 30. They'd rather do 45-30. Yeah, Armoda, Hokey Gamer doesn't mind playing you. You'll get a good game there. Friday night. I love Friday night. I love when we make it here and it's time for the fights. I definitely missed one when I had my vacation. And I think there were 1 or 2 other times in Hawaii where I couldn't do the commentary properly. But this is a pretty consistent part of my week to end up here on a Friday night. And it's very interesting to play like a really tough chess game. Or in my case, to comment chess for a few hours, But it's interesting to have something that's like pretty challenging, kind of at the lowest, tiredest point in your week for a lot of us. Of course, there are people in other time zones for whom it's Saturday morning and they've slept well and they're fresh, But for a lot of us, Friday night, to come together when we're really tired and then like pull out and furnish our, our most intense effort, it's kind of a cool thing. Sometimes you're home in bed. That sounds good. Maybe I should comment from my bed one day. Oh, I'm sorry, Miss Ditch. You won 2 classical games in a row one day? That's cool. I'm sorry I missed it, yeah. Anybody here in chat watched the Sinquefield Cup in St. Louis this past week? And if so, what do you think of them? Right, the 4th of July. That's right, Alvin. My family had something going on, guests, friends, whatever that day. You started playing 15-10. Fair enough, Dustin. Sorry. Dustin is like Dustin Robinson. Dustin. Totally. You should play the time control that's good for you and that you're ready for. We have 15-minute tournaments with a 5-second increment every Sunday morning. So you're definitely ready to play one of those sometime when you want. And one day you can play in the Friday night fights. Friday night fights, whenever you get to it, Dustin, or for anyone else out there who hasn't played classical chess before, Friday night fights is a pretty gentle place to play your first classical chess, right? Because you're like in here with other dojoers. There's no money on the line. You're not yet at an OTB venue. You haven't paid an entry fee, So it's like it could be kind of relaxed for classical chess. Now that said, like some people, work really hard on their games. I'm not trying to take away from the epic efforts we see some Friday nights, right? But if you want to play somewhere where you haven't traveled, you haven't paid a hotel fee, an entry fee, this is a pretty low pressure place to play your first games, I think, if you want it to be. Hey, good to see you, DH Germany. Yeah, family's pretty well. At least one of them has COVID, but it's not hurting us too bad this time around. Right, so how does a postmortem work? If you've played a chess game on chess.com before, you should know that right when the game ends, there's kind of like a chat box where you can chat with your opponent. You can also often find your opponent in the chat on YouTube or Twitch, and many people do chat together on YouTube or Twitch on purpose, where everyone else can sort of hear and see them. Prague's game against Gukesh was impressive by Prague. It was very nicely played by Prague. It was a pretty feeble game by Gukesh, if I may say that, Hokey Gamer. Like, his opening play there, he got himself into such a bad position so quickly.
You just let me know when she's ready to nurse.
Okay. Let me see. 1 second, folks. We're going to check on the situation. 5 minutes till the games start still. Est-ce que tu veux regarder si le thermomètre est en haut?
Sure.
Mais aussi, si t'es pas capable de marcher à ton lit, on va se coucher à peu près. Hey folks, for those of you who've been around, you know that Friday Night Fights starts right at bedtime, so it's a little chaotic for a few minutes as we get things settled. But I will be focused, as you will be, in a few minutes, and we'll really get into the games, provide some commentary for anybody who's newer. While you play your game, you're going to close or mute the stream while you're playing. If I cover your game, which there's a good chance I will, you can go back later and watch the recording of it to see what I thought about your game and compare my thoughts to what you were thinking during the game, or maybe any advice that I have for you in there. In Chess Dojo, there's an option to submit an annotated game for Sensei analysis. Is it somewhat similar to the commentary in Friday Night Fights? A little bit, Alvin, but it's different. It won't be live, and it won't be bouncing between your game and others. It won't be as long as a Friday Night Fights commentary, which might be 3 or 4 hours, right? Like, sometimes I've watched one of your games for 3 hours without interruptions, when your game was the one that grabbed me that night. But the Sensei will play over your game and annotations, and then they'll record a video just on your game. Yeah, everybody wants to play. Well, a lot of people want to play a good game. Bold Cool wants to play an okay game. Fair enough. Play an okay game. I hope you will. Prague is having a fantastic year, Bold Cool. You're absolutely right. Greetings to the Purple Leopard. Right on. Okay, games are starting in a minute. Everyone will be able to, if folks want to join later, they'll be able to. You know, people can join throughout the night. Um, did anyone have trouble getting into the tournaments? Let me see. One of the easier ways to find it if you're on YouTube is this link here. And if you're on Twitch, it's just this fight command, which gives 2 direct links to the 2 different sections, over or under 1600. Gefilte Fish, Abdusatorov will bounce back, and Kamer did well in India. Yep, that was an exciting ranking shakeup to see Kamer join the top 10, as was his due eventually. He's a top 10 level talent and player. And righto, games are starting. Oh no, still like a few seconds to go. Bold Cool says, if the chess rating system was better, Prague would be world number 1, not an inactive semi-retired player who has switched to a different game. It's a good point, Bold Cool. Pretty well. Yeah, you could definitely back that up with some arguments. I don't know. Do they have a page, Bold Cool, which gives like the top performance ratings for the year? It's really too bad they don't have something a little more representative, right? Of like who's really on top. Let's see. Prague this year has gained 30 rating points. Yeah, he's had a great year. Yeah. I think why not just have multiple rankings, you know? Like I don't see we're in such a modern time. It's not that hard to publish more than one list or to have more than one. Oh, here are the games. Like you could have like a, you know, who's the top player this year kind of thing. Whoa. Why is this on? Non mais elle a raison, l'idiot est en train de hurler. Il n'a besoin de rien, tu vas voir. Just a second.
You don't have to bend your knees.
Qu'est-ce qui se passe?
Apparently the big deal is that when he bends his knee, his hurt.
Et depuis quand est-ce que tu as mal au genou? All right. Woo, we got a Dragon Sicilian with white posturing towards a Yugoslav attack. Pawn on f3 to launch these pawns. Bishop here aimed towards the king. And usually they're going to castle queenside. That would complete the white attack. Is f3 theory? Yeah, f3 is theory. Absolutely. This is the most common way for people to now play against the dragon. Has been for 60, 70 years. Since Bobby Fischer's time. Yeah. All right, I wanted to open up a few more games, just see what other kind of positions we got before us. This is like a London, Jobava London for white. Pawn chain, bishop outside the pawn chain. Try to go after, whoops, that's a mistake. Try to go after the dark squares. Black trying to counter that bishop of whites, but it's an important and sort of dubious pawn on c6. c6. Yeah, that's a little dubious because now we go for trading the dark square bishop, but we've got so many pawns on light squares, and it's not easy to get them off of light squares. So this bishop's going to be blocked in, and all those other squares are going to be hard to defend with the bishop traded. So this opening looks pretty risky for Alyekhin's cat. The beginning setup has some real positional risk. We're going to open up another game.
Zillian wants you, David, and she wants milk and bottle.
Cool.
I don't think I should be in there any longer with her, so I will go upstairs.
Sounds good.
She's crying now.
I hear that. What? What?
She's crying.
Oh, merci. Quelle bonne information. J'avais aucune idée, hein. Heureusement pour les infos. All right, so Hermats has played a very, very greedy version of a Caro-Kann here. When white plays the advance, which is also greedy in its own right, Hermats immediately counters the pawn supporting the pawn that's grabbing the most space. White defends it, trades, gets the knight here, putting pressure on d4. White tries to cover it with the knight. Hermats gets the bishop outside the pawn chain to start pressuring the knight in order to undermine the defense of this pawn. And they have achieved a position that no French player has ever had. A thing of beauty. I believe Gefilte Fish is commenting on this game and saying advantage to black. Wow. What a powerful start from Hermats here on the game. Woohoo! Alexander Sue! Gern geschehen, Triple McTwist. Alright, so white castles. Black brings the knight. It might also go after the d4 pawn. These players are blazing through this game. Some quick moves. Knight f5. There it is. Pressure on d4. h3. Bishop f3. The knight from d2 is going to replace it. And just barely, white manages to hold on to their d4 pawn. White found that sequence very quickly. It was not obvious how to keep that pawn defended. If the bishop had dropped back, white would have just won the game immediately, I think. So, bishop f3, knight f3. All right. The famous Friday night fights. You made it, Subaru. I'll be right back. We're going to do another 10-second interruption as we try and settle everybody down. I think that they don't want to settle down. So, first Friday night fights for Eigen. Bravo, Eigen. Let's get it, as they sometimes say, right? They say that. Let's get it. White plays a3. The pawn is held up. And does a3 mean white wants to grab even more now that they've defended what they already have? That would put them in position to then also put the bishop here and overprotect that pawn. Huh. Black got everything they ever wanted. And white still stayed in it. And there's b4. They're playing very strong moves despite not using much time. So they must both be quite familiar with this opening. Or they're getting lucky. You know how they say that if you give them enough tries, a billion little monkeys could type out the collected work of Shakespeare just by accident. Just you leave them with a million monkeys and a million typewriters. So it is true that, that if people just play enough, they can occasionally accidentally blitz out really, really strong moves. But qu'est-ce que tu veux?
It's hard to go to bed when he's saying.
Où est-ce que tu dors? C'est quoi? C'est où ton lit? Oh. Tu te couches pas en haut ce soir? Ok. Bah désolé, je peux rien faire pour lui, ni pour elle, ni pour personne. Hein. Si elles veulent crier, on peut rien faire là-dessus. C'est leur choix. That's absolutely right, DM Stewart, yeah. Oh, David Justice. Maybe that could have been the way for Black to enforce their will on this game. Oh. That's a typical move from the French, right? 3 pieces pressure the pawn and... Oh, man. Those coconuts are in trouble. Yeah, I think d takes c5 is one like major variation for white that's good, but isn't this move also good? Knight f3 also possible. And if black plays something like knight c6 or bishop g4, you can then take on c5 still. And if they play e6, then you're a tempo up on mainline advanced Frenches, which is going to be good for white. I think this move is fine too. I think I played it at a tournament last year, and I think it went something like this. Yeah. I think I played this line as white, and it was very good for white as well. So you don't have to take on c5 on the first move. I think you can play knight f3 or take. But c3 might not be correct, because black enforces that trade, and now you can't trade on c5 to take the pressure off. You can't punish black on the queen side, so they're just setting up their good French, huh? So maybe black missed an important chance with the early queen b6 that a couple people in chat noticed and pointed out. Queen b6, continuing that assault on d4. Now, I would guess, given that white defended d4, the position should be fine for white, right? Even though black at first sort of got away with their aggressive c5, bishop g4 kind of thing. Since they didn't immediately capitalize on d4, seems like white should be okay. Position looks sound for white. I guess not bad for black either, right? All their pieces are still on fine squares. Bishop on c8 is on its best square, which is off the board. All right. Well, that was an exciting start to that game. Let's click on another one. Here we've got our Dragon Sicilian. White did castle queenside, so we get the excitement we were promised. Here comes the H-pawn, coming to H5, even without the G-pawn. I think with the bishop on B3, this is even more potent if your opponent tries doing something like this. Because there's some like oomph here. So there's a little more white can do with this. Maybe you just immediately throw it all. Whoops. I was going to take on H5. Hang on. This looks very mate-like. Okay. Hokey Gamer's thinking here. It's a great moment to think because you get the big choice H5, or you can keep doing stuff on the queen side. It's definitely the kind of moment where I would think. Normally I'd think maybe 10 minutes in a classical game, but I would have twice as much time. They're playing 45 plus 30, so yeah, anywhere from 5 to 12 minutes is probably reasonable for this move. 10 or 12 being a lot and 45-30, but if you feel like you're making progress on the position, it's an important position, then I suppose you can. The other game we have here, the sort of London type system. Black developed the knight out of the way of the bishops facing each other. Now I don't feel the knight's impressive here though. Okay, trying to challenge that knight. Good call. Yeah, we can't just suffer that piece there for very long. I feel like a queen trade is something that black would be reasonably happy to see. Let's see if Alyoshin's cat takes the trade. Oh, white's going to open the H file then and threaten the H7 pawn. So I guess that's something black has to make sure that they're comfortable with, right? The trade actually develops an extra white piece and threatens black. So black has to spend another move on these pawns.
Some milk in a bottle, please?
Okay.
Thank you. She's been crying long enough.
So let's see. What choice did the cat make? Chomp, 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 chomp. And clamp that bishop out. Okay. Fair enough. Cyndaquil sounds fun. I don't know Cyndaquil, but it sounds fun. And you like the Sicilian, so you probably like the kind of Pokemon I would like if I knew them. Yeah, white doesn't have like a huge attack coming anymore in this position, DM Stewart, with the queens traded. But white has, you know, some nice positional factors even in an endgame, right? They have some good control of the dark squares from these 3 pawns here, right? In a board with no dark squared bishops, that means their knights can sit on squares like G5, E5, or C5 in some cases, right? There's the potential of sometimes attacking the E6 pawn along the file when you move your knight out of the way. And your rook has some influence like that. If you compare it to black, this rook doesn't really have any influence. This one doesn't have much influence yet. This bishop's pretty blocked in. This one's got a little more scope. And none of the black pieces really has a square as nice as this knight on E5, right? So there's no attack coming from white at the moment, but there's a lot of pleasant things about white's position. Still a very nice position for the 8 bells to be in. And there's a rook to the E file. Knight D6. Maybe at some point white could try and create some pressure with G4, you know, using the bishop. The problem is that when you do so, if black trades like this, it might sometimes give them access to this square here. So you just have to count carefully. Do you still have control over this square? And you have to be prepared for these counterattacks like this. Right? So here I could calculate takes, threatening this pawn. Knight takes, rook takes, and I defend my side pawns. And white is up a pawn. Still with this beautiful knight versus not good bishop. So for now, white could maybe play G4 if they want to. It's like a possibility. It's a thought. It's the kind of thing to think about. Do I want to do this? Or do I have some other maneuvers that improve my position? Actually, it's a good position to think about strategic chess if you don't have a baby screaming in the background really loudly the whole time. What are the things one could do in a position like this? You can try and increase your advantage by bringing your pieces to even better squares if you got any pieces that are not well placed. Or you can try and gain space, make pawn breaks, make advances in some part of the board where you've got some reason to suspect you could be better. Here in terms of pieces, I would say at least 4 of the white pieces are pretty ideally placed. So if we were looking for just a maneuver or an improvement of somebody, it would be maybe this knight here. At the same time, I don't really see a better square for this knight. I mean, I could try bringing it towards C5, right? But black could play B6. Oh, no, they couldn't. Oh, maybe I could try to get this one here. Maybe. Is that just not another kind of crying filter fish? B3. Maybe looking to just improve the king a little bit. Oh, no, and also trying to prevent the opponent from finding some squares. Yeah, makes sense. What's up?
If she's not feeling well and she needs a little bit of help going to sleep tonight,
Well, at your level, DM Stewart, you might be onto something. At your level, there's definitely some mismatch between black putting all the pawns on light squares and playing a dark squared bishop trade. But not everybody necessarily appreciates that degree of positional harmony in their games. So I was saying we could either try and maneuver one of our pieces to a better square, or what's the other thing you can do in chess to improve your position? You can at some point play a pawn break, right? You can make an advance, right? If there's an area where you can just advance with nobody stopping you, you can bring your pawns forward, take more space. But a typical way to increase your advantage is to at some point make a pawn break, threatening to open new files or diagonals for your pieces to act on. That'll really ramp up pressure. Black's long-term plans seem tough, says Alexander. Yeah, I mean, the long-term plan, for me, I might want to play b6 if it didn't lose this pawn, right? And then c5. And so there are ways to maybe engineer that. Like maybe we could set that up somehow. But if I could play b6, c5, I feel like I could, gain some space over here, plus start fighting for some dark squares and leave some diagonal open for my bishop. So that's one idea for black. Black's pretty stuck and passive though. There's not a lot of ideas for black. The idea of b5 and a5 trying to just keep things closed. I don't know. You have to really make sure white's knight doesn't drop there. This pawn's just left behind being weak. It's, trying to support these pawns. There is a plan b6 and then a5. And then bishop a6. Trying to trade the bad bishop for something better. So that could be considered as well, sometimes as a positional remedy. Yeah. Potzer Gamers, some people try to go through every branch. Depending on how much intuition you have from math, you may understand that it's not possible to go through every branch, but some people try to. It's not very useful. Yeah, white's not letting black do much here. This b3 move is, just a little more constriction. Take another thing away. Give the king room to come up another step. Just slowly taking and taking. It's a very pleasant position from white. And one of the nicest things to do in a position this pleasant is just wait for your opponent to try and come up with something to do. Because it'll probably be bad because they've got no room to do anything good. I feel like it would be funny to give masters positions like this as black and then have them play against somebody rated, 18, 1900 and see, what do they do from such a bad position? How do they get a game? That'll be interesting. No, b5 can't be black's best move because of knight takes c6. An important premise for defensive play in these kinds of positions is you have to be willing to do very, very little. Because most of what you can do is bad. So you really have to be comfortable and attuned psychologically to the concept of just not doing much. Because if you can't do anything good, at least do nothing. Maybe your opponent won't know how to win the game, right? But if you give them the game, maybe an idea like knight d7 and trade that knight off, since the other knight's far away from replacing it. It's a plausible defensive measure, yeah. Rook e8. That's the move I would have played if I were playing here against a low-rated player from this terrible position. I'd probably start engaging in the maneuver rook e8, rook e7, rook c7. Again, you think Hikaru could win in classical against GMs from the black side here? What's your rating, Patzer Gamer? Okay. Well, you're definitely strong enough that you're allowed to work on an opening repertoire if you want to. Hey, Chris. Hey, Spence. It might be doing too much, gefilte fish, yeah. The other reason I'm playing rook e8 to e7 is because I want to move this bishop potentially off of c8 to d7 in some cases. But I don't want to do something like, it's a bad bishop, I'll just develop it. And then boom, boom, boom. And suddenly I'm like, oh, they could take my bad bishop. Now I'm down a pawn and things are opening up. So the rook is here partly to defend my most obvious weakness as well. Fair plan, David Justice, suggesting doubling rooks on the h file for white and then playing g4. Yeah. So organizing your opening repertoire. I guess Oh, hi Cats play chess very well. I guess Patzer Gamer, you're gonna have to narrow how many moves you look at, because you're trying to look at an impossible number of moves. So maybe try and limit the moves you look to the top 2 or 3 moves that look plausible to you. But you also have to realize there are some points where there's more plausible moves and some points where there are less plausible moves. Well, in opening repertoire gefilte fish, people also like write it down and then review it to help themselves remember it when it's something that doesn't fit into their brain. Let's go material. Courses. Let's look at an opening course. Well, the thing is, Patzer Gamer, you can't be ready for all their sidelines. There's just no way. You'll just blow yourself out. Here's an example from a dojo course. So this is Kostya's repertoire. He looks at either e4 or knight f3 here, and that's it. Are there other moves? Yeah. There's b4 and g3 and queen d3 and e3. But he's not going to look at every move. You know. Instead of looking at g3, he only looks at knight f3, g3. He could have also looked at, g3, castles, bishop g2, d6, then knight f3. But he chose sort of one move order to talk about the idea of putting the bishop on g2, right? He didn't worry about every different order that could have brought the bishop g2 and knight f3 and pawn g3. Because you could have, there's three different moves for white. So there's something like 6 different ways white could have played those 3 moves, right? He's not worrying about all of that and the difference between each one, unless he knows that there's some really specific issue there, right? He gives 2 different possible lines for black. Interesting. Here he gives 3 moves for white. 1 move that's not good to show the idea for black, and 2 moves that he considers good. Pawn takes pawn and d5, right? Now again, could white play e3 here? Yes. But that's not something that maximizes white's move so far. It's not the point of this opening, right? The point is either to gain space or to trade and have the position more open for the bishop on g2. But just sitting here with a pawn on e3 is going to let black play rook e8 and e4, grabbing space for black, right? So that's just not the point of the opening, right? Can you play rook b1? Maybe. It's not the point of the opening. Can you play a3? Maybe. Not the point of the opening. So you see, he's able to narrow how many moves he looks at by only looking at the moves that have a real consequent point, right? Where you can say, this is the idea. This is the reason for this. This is something that, people play against me, and I know why. Since the center is closed, black can lose time in order to bring the knight to a better square. e4, a5. And then he stops. To give you a sense of, like, one of the other important things is not just how many moves to look at, but when to stop. Here Kostya stops. Could he keep going with his analysis? Oh, forever. Forever. You could always keep going forever. But here he's saying he knows where a few of his pieces are and what his main plans are, right? His knight's going to a6. Along with the pawn on a5, it's going to restrain white from advancing further on the queen side with these 2 moves. This knight's going to get out of the way. This knight's going to get out of the way with the idea of playing f5. And that's where black's going to build their strength. So he's showing how are we restraining white's plan, what is our plan, where are a few of our pieces going. And that's it. Done. Okay? So I could go further than that, but we've got a whole tournament to cover, right? So that's as much as I can help you on your question today in the middle of this other show. Spencer, the answer to your question is no. While you're playing in the tournament, you're supposed to close the stream and just focus on your game and then rejoin us when your game's done. All right, so we got g4, building pressure, rook e7, holding on, g5, grabbing more space, and the knight's got nowhere good to go, so this looks like a big accomplishment from white. This g4, g5 is looking very strong here. Knight went to e8. Of course, there will be those who wonder if it shouldn't have gone to d7 to try and trade itself, because it's not looking very good here. Now, white puts the pressure on again with g4. Also, you could put quite a bit of pressure by doubling rooks on the h-file now, right? With your g5 pawn stopping black from ever playing h6. Have you changed your mind, Eigen, with all this data? You no longer think your opening is your problem? There is Bakal Man every Friday. Well, I think we skipped 1 week because I was on vacation, but we've probably had 51 Friday night classical tournaments in the last 52 weeks here on the dojo. Okay, so G4, increasing some pressure. Yeah, G4 is certainly consistent. It's cranking on some pressure. I like that White realized they don't have to choose between pressure or space. They can have both because they've got 2 G-pawns. So I like that realization from White. It's getting harder and harder to breathe here, right? What's that song? Is there anyone out there? Because it's getting harder and harder to breathe. Yeah. That's what Black's wondering. Is there anyone out there? All the black pieces stuck inside this stonewall position. Black's going to have to play G6. And it'll cover H7 with the rooks along the second rank. So they're going to definitely have to play G6. And strangely, I don't really see how White cracks the position yet either. I know they've made progress with these 2 G-pawn moves. Looks very nice, but I still don't see how to crack Black at all. Still too far away. All right. Look at some of our other games here. Oh. We got some action on this dragon. So we saw H5 from Armada. Oh, no. We saw H4 from Armada threatening H5, we thought, right? So Oki Gamer plays knight e5. Often the point of this move is to follow with knight c4 with the knight. And White played h5 without g4. Black takes it, White sacks, and then goes into h6. e6. Trying to lock out the bishop's pressure and also keep the knight out of f5. Oh, and finally, it lets the queen come to this area to defend. Yeah. Okay. Very defensive. Lots of defensive potential with that e6 pawn move. Trades. Brings the rook. Brings the rook. King steps out a bit. So, right now, White is down in exchange. They won back the pawn, but they still have a knight. Let's say this one here on c3. Against a rook. It's a classic sack, this rook takes h5, right? But looking at this position right now, the evaluation feels pretty unclear, right? White doesn't have a lot of other pieces attacking. Of course, there's some compensation. Definitely things White can do. I mean, you could even imagine targeting this pawn just with knight e2. And it's not clear how Black wants to save that pawn or show an advantage because the queen doesn't want to go back. She wants to be over here. And I guess she could go back. And it wouldn't be the end of the world. But, you know, there's still some kind of pressure here. So, yeah, I think the important point is that this position's pretty unclear, and White probably had something pleasant here that might be better than the exchange sack. So I'm going to show you the most common way I think people play this position after the knight takes. I think normally they play g4. Even though Fischer says sack, sack, mate, here's how I think Fischer actually played the position. He would go there first, like this. Kicking the knight, and then he would go here, trading. like that. Now his plan is, let's say queen b6 for argument's sake, takes, check here. Now g5, knight h5, takes. This is where we get into sack mate territory. If f4, knight g4, huh? Oh, knight d5's killer. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't have allowed that as black. Knight d5, I don't know. Sometimes a very initiative-y move like this. G6. Pawn takes f4. Then knight can still block the bishop. Yeah, that's good. Maybe just take the pawn. Go here. Here. Check. Takes, threatening mate. Oh, that's just too good, that knight d5, huh? That's too good. So I think that's more like Fischer's formula. Like, why does it matter to wait 2 moves to take with the rook? Well, it gives us g4, g5 for free, because the knight moves back and forth. Also, we've gotten our queen in using the power of the rook before we sack the rook. So by the time I'm sacking the rook, my queen's already in. If you compare that with the position in the game, right? White's queen is not actually in. They sacked the exchange with the queen here, then brought the second rook into the game this way, but they haven't yet had a chance to get the queen over there. So I would say that's the biggest problem I have with the exchange sack, is I think white was better if they waited on it. First, get the tempi out of your g-pawn, get your bishop into h6, trade their piece, get your queen into the game. Then your position's ready for some sacking action. Okay, so Armoda plays this knight to e2. That opens up queen d6 and the possibility of this knight showing up on the king side. Reasonable. Now, candidate moves for black. They could go b4. Now there's a pawn on e6 and the knight can't go into the center. You could try to displace white's knight. You could play very aggressive a5, trying to win another piece. Could play rook c6, just defending the pawn. And then my not that much favorite queen e7, defending the pawn. I feel like she's on a better square here. And maybe you could go here. But it does give the d6 pawn, and there's no clear counter tactic for black. So I wouldn't be pumped about giving that d6 pawn to white for nothing at this point as black. So let me grab a cup of water. Try and power myself up here. Oh, let me see, Alexander. That's definitely worth asking. Is knight f5 plausible, he asks, with the idea that if black takes, you do get knight d5. And as you can see, knight f5 threatens d6, as well as getting the knight close to the king side with maybe different options. So I'll leave you all to think about Alexander's question while I grab my water. glass of water. Piece of dry bread from the kids' lunch. And a couple macadamia nuts enrobés in chocolate. Is there a word for that in English? Does it say covered, maybe? Covered in chocolate. So those will hopefully help me go a bit more. So knight f5. First, let's check if black can take it. Then we can look at fancy moves like Jan is saying maybe b4, counterattacking this other knight first, right? Fancy. We're just going to look at the straightforward move first. Takes. The only follow-up is probably knight d5. Similar to Jan's move, by the way. You know, maybe black could take this knight first, then take the other knight, right? So there are... You have to remember when you do stuff like this that your opponent's got often multiple options, right? Once you put a piece that's hanging and you up the stakes like that, the number of moves that are conceivable for them to achieve their goals expand, right? Now they're allowed to, say, sack some amount of material in order to counter what you're doing, and so forth. Yeah, we're doing fine, Graham. But, you know, in a moment, half of us will be licking our wounds, right? Or at least the players, you know. The spectators should be okay for the most part. Okay, so ef5, knight d5. Does it work? So if the queen goes the wrong way and just lets white in, that feels... So let's say she stays on this side of the board near the king. What is the follow-up for white? At first, I don't see much, but then I do see this move, rook g5, kind of checkmating the queen instead of the king. If the queen goes here, she could be lost to this move, right? And if knight g6 is played, then pawn takes f5 seems to have some significant chance of winning this knight back. f6. Rook g3, bishop f5. Huh? Rook here, knight back to e5. Yeah, nothing's working here for white, I think. I would also say that after queen h6, white's given so much material that it's probably still unclear. Yeah, it's queen against two rooks. Unclear, but possible. You know, I could see this working out for white. So knight g6. Yeah. Okay, now let's look at b4. Unfortunately, knight f5, the biggest thing that it was threatening was like a pawn, right? The second biggest, or maybe the biggest thing was this rook h6. If the queen moves away, what's the follow-up? If we successfully push that queen away with rook h6. Does that mean your first game was today, Graham, and you've got 2 tomorrow and 2 on Sunday, perhaps? Oh, there might even be games on Monday, huh? 5-round classical tournament. And it's your first classical tournament of your life. Wait, I blundered 2 completely winning positions. In one game, Graham? Or in 2 different games? Okay, Jan, what do you see? Sure can, Mars. You can do whatever you want. You TD'd an adjournment. Very nice, DM Stewart. I'm glad that people where you live still trust other people. That's nice to hear. All right, Graham, you got 2 games tomorrow, 2 games Sunday. So you're going to have to finish licking your wounds pretty quickly, right? Because you want to make the most of this tournament. All right, Jan got the answer. And I think Mars Robinson had gotten the answer as well. Rook h7, king h7. Queen swoops in. and a nice little checkmate. So rook h6 is no joke here. However, this pawn takes knight was no joke either that Jan had been threatening. So Jan's not even going to move this queen away, not going to defend the queen, not going to sack the queen. Pawn takes knight. +8 Graham. That's like a rook and a bishop extra in the endgame. You were up a rook and a bishop on the board. So the queen's attacked. If white takes here, black takes here, they've eaten a knight for free. So black's really winning. And if you count the pieces, you'll see this knight's hanging. This is threatening to queen. Black's up a rook from white taking on h5 earlier as well. This is going very, very badly, right? So queen. Okay, so white could try and do something with the keeping the queen on the board, right? Now, if I retreat, I'm still in line for this. But this is what I want to do. Knight here. Queen h2. I'm going to be brave. I'm going to allow it. Rook h7, king g8. Oh, nice. You got 2 dojoers at the tournament with you. It was +8 positional. You had equal material on the board. And it was +8 positional. Okay. So, Graham, let me try and caution you and everybody else here about this. Because I think, this is going to apply to many people other than you. You're being overly upset because you're being misled by what a computer can see. This is one of the reasons you should not have looked at your game with a computer. If you'd shown the game to me, and I wouldn't have seen the mate in 9, so I couldn't have told you, here you missed forced mate. Nor would I have assessed your endgame as +8 because you had a nice position. I would have said you had a nice position. Now after this move, it looks, less nice. Right? The computer is looking so far ahead, it's flagging things as mistakes that are just not at your level. So it's stuff that you can get upset about wrongly. Because it's not something you should see or something that you should even be aware of. Like, do you calculate 9 moves ahead when you play, Graham? Have you ever calculated a mate in 9 in your life? The answer might be yes if you're like a master, but it's your first tournament, so I may have calculated a mate in 9, I don't know, once or twice in my life, but not very guaranteed to get it. Okay, so the mate in 9, we can let it go. There's no way you can calculate a mate in 9, right? Irrelevant. Now let's talk about the second one. Instead of saying, like, I blew +8, blowing +8, Graham, is making it sound like you can't win an endgame with an extra queen. It is making you sound like an idiot when you're not, right? You had a pawn up endgame, and you didn't know if you should trade or not trade a piece, right? You had a pawn up endgame, and you didn't know whether the position was more winning or less winning, depending on whether you trade a piece. That's not a blunder. It's just like a thing that is at the right level for you, perhaps, to think about in the future. In a game, Carl, not in a puzzle. In a game. Like, you're playing a game, and you're thinking about all kinds of things, and your clock is ticking, and you're considering options, and nobody told you that you had a forced mate in the position, And then Graham is supposed to calculate a maiden 9. So Graham made a wrong decision about whether or not to trade a piece in a pawn up endgame. Fine. Sounds like a mistake, Graham, but not a blunder. And we have to be okay with making some mistakes. If you want to be upset about a mistake, hi Carl, good to see you. If you want to be upset about making a mistake, at least be upset about a mistake that feels like well beneath you. So get a few tournaments under your belt, like maybe 3 tournaments, so you've got a baseline and you have an understanding. This is about the kind of mistakes I make. This is the kind of things that I see. These are the kind of good moves I do find. These are the ones I don't find. And then if you want to, when you play in a future tournament and you play below your level, you miss things that you feel like you would have seen at your last tournament or you would see on an average day, then if you really want to, you can get upset about that. In general, when people say blunder, my current kind of concept of what a blunder is a blunder is a mistake that's at a much lower level than your average play. Right? If I make a mistake that's at the right level for me, then it's a mistake. Right? So for example, myself, if I'm in this position as black and I don't know whether to play, let's go to the actual position of the game after knight e2. If I'm not sure whether to play rook c6 or b4 or a5, and I think about it for a while and I miss a detail that makes a5, queen d6, a4 good for me or bad for me or something like that, that's 4 or 5 moves down the road, I would consider that, I guess in child psychology they would call it, or in child development and education they would call it like an age appropriate mistake. For me it's like a level appropriate mistake, right? It would be a level appropriate mistake for me. So I would call it a mistake. I would categorize it in analysis. It would be the kind of thing that I'd want to work on in the future, right? But if in this position for some reason I didn't notice that white was attacking my d6 pawn, for me that would be a blunder, right? So if I played like rook g8 and white took here and I was like, whoa, surprise, I didn't see that. For me, at my current level, I would consider that a blunder. It's just a pawn, which might or might not lose me the game, but it would be a blunder because normally I'm very aware that when you move this piece, it's unveiling the file. For somebody rated 700, maybe not. It might not be a blunder for them. It's just like they're used to when the knight moves, they look at f4 and g3, right? The squares the knight can go to. They don't look at what the knight's leaving behind. It might be a level appropriate blunder for someone rated 700. For me, it would be a blunder. Similarly, as Stamen is saying, Hikaru says I blundered and the eval bar drops 1/10 of a pawn, right? Or same for like Magnus or Hikaru. They'll be like, oh my gosh, I totally blundered this thing. And the thing they blundered is like a detail on move 6 of a variation. I totally blundered. I saw blah, 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 blah. Nobody's even following, right? Blah, 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 but I missed that after blah, 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 black has blah, which totally changes like the position, you know? So after blah, 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 I had to realize, oh, there's that, so I have to do this other thing instead. And, you know, okay, there goes some of my advantage. For them, maybe that's a blunder because their level is like this. So even something here is a blunder, right? So what you've described, Graham, you know, not knowing whether or not to make that trade in the pawn up endgame is definitely in the realm of a mistake, not a blunder. So let's call that a mistake. It's fine to have a couple mistakes. We're not going to mourn it. So we're done feeling bad about that. The only thing you did that we could consider perhaps a blunder, as you said yourself just now, my mistake was looking at the game with the computer right afterwards. Given that you are a dojoer, you don't have a lot of experience in chess tournaments. You're allowed to make mistakes like forgetting to hit your clock or not writing down a move correctly. But given that you're a dojoer, that one might be a blunder. That might be below your level. You might have heard me tell you before that you don't want to traumatize yourself with the computer. But A strong move was coming here into chat with all of us, getting it out of your system, right? Doing a little group therapy here, letting it go. If you're done feeling bad about the mistakes now, then you've made up for one blunder with a good move afterwards, right? All right. Hope you enjoyed the game, Mystic. See you next time. Went real fast, huh? And Graham, I'm not even sure you lost this game that you played. Your first tournament game of your life. Did it possibly end in a draw? Back in my day, when people played their first tournament game, they would like get scholars mated or fools mated. I had a friend from my high school, and I think his first tournament game, he played F4, E5, the Fromm's Gambit, right? And he played E3. Black landed a strong Queen H4 check in the first few moves. My first tournament game, I played an illegal move. I castled when my opponent's bishop was on C4, and I didn't have any pawns on the diagonal. So, if you played a game with legal moves, hit your clock a bunch of times, didn't hang your queen or your king, then, you had a decent start. You did eventually lose the game. Okay, fair enough. So, let's just keep going tomorrow, right? Keep it rolling. 64 move grind. Much better than getting checkmated in the first 10 moves, right? So. Okay, Spencer. So, maybe patience, a thing to work on in the future, which is fine. And going and playing your first tournament game counts as a double exclamation mark, says Mars Robinson over on Twitch. I agree with them. Hokey Gamer played rook g8, allowing potentially queen takes d6. White played rook h2, covering the g-pawn. Rook g7, queen d6. See, for me, that would have been a blunder, but for Hokey Gamer, maybe it's okay. Now White's got one pawn and a knight against a rook, and Black's position's a little bit disconnected, right? With one rook over here, one rook over there. Not really cohesive. White's heavy pieces, despite having less heavy pieces, are on good squares. The position's probably pretty close to equal at the moment. So, what might White want to do next with this position? We can't checkmate Black. Hokey Gamer saw to that, right? They flooded the king side with pieces. Hokey Gamer's reaction to White's rook h5 sacrifice. Check this out, right? Rook takes h5 sacrifice, and then bishop h6. What's the reaction? e6, blocking these two pieces from the king side and allowing the queen over here, right? Trade, rook comes over, queen comes out, right? King backs up, rook comes over to that side. So Hokey Gamer has flooded the king side with defensive resources, and now the defenders outnumber the attackers. So they've made sure that there wouldn't be like a mating attack from White deciding this game. So White's going to have to come up with something else now, right? Some other way to play this position with knight and pawn against rook. Sleep is the absolutely most powerful weapon for a chess player. Well, that paints a fairly clear picture, doesn't it, Spencer? So I'm thinking... maybe I'd look at my 3 pawns against 2 on the queen side as white. I'd wonder whether or not b4 is a problem for me. If it's a problem, I might put my pawn on a3. If it's not a problem, I might actually push a4 and kind of encourage some action over here while the opponent's pieces are over there. Interesting to think about. I also thought about bringing my knight back here now that I've already taken the pawn and come back, but when I thought of the rook lining up with my queen, I didn't feel very good about knight d4. Let's see. Okay, Armoda's come up with something. The queen looking at a square over there, perhaps, to get into the queen side. Nice. Yes. Going to bed if you're not going to be able to sleep is, yeah, maybe not helpful. But if you can actually sleep, that's going to be good, Graham. That's going to be good. We can ask similar sort of general questions about the position of Hokey Gamer here. Where does Black want to be playing now, right? They've covered the king. But what does Black want to do, right? Is there any piece you want to improve or anything of White's you want to attack? Players are doing a good job using their time. You can see, you know, plenty of good time usage here. Both players have used quite a lot. Hokey Gamer plays knight c4. That's going to progress the game, yeah. That opens up the queen on this diagonal here, which is cool. We get a trade. Now does Black want to take back with rook or pawn? I'd say probably rook. But I had no idea how to recapture in these positions for most of my life, so kind of irrelevant at 15, 1600 level. You know, you just take back some way or other. You don't really know which is right. DM Stewart says definitely keep the pawns connected. Funny that DM Stewart says they're 750 or so, whereas like the chess understanding... And you said that yourself, Stuart, right? That you're like the 750 who weirdly has a bunch of chess understanding but can't quite calculate. But yeah, this concept keeping the pawns together is like a big one. I used to think like, well, what if I want to attack on the B file? You know, I didn't know. Which one do I want? The B file, the C file? I just didn't know. I mean, I was probably over 2,000 still without any idea which one's better and why is one better or the other. Generally, it's better to take with the piece and these Sicilians. Keep the pawns together, put pressure on this file, and have these pawns able to advance better versus the white position if you ever need pawns to break stuff down. Nice. Postmortem, new chess friend. Yeah. Perhaps one of the reasons I love the postmortem so much is that's where I've made several of my best friends in life, is in chess postmortems. But I do also really feel like it's one of the greatest things in the whole chess tradition. The idea that that you battle like crazy against your opponent. But then when it's over, you're peers, right? There's a shared interest and love and appreciation. You couldn't have played the game without the other person, so you you really need them and they need you. And during a game, you're trying to trick them and trap them too, right? Like you'll lay traps and you'll be devious. And afterwards, you kind of share chess knowledge with each other pretty openly. I mean, I really feel like it's beautiful and amazing, but it may partly be just because of how nice it's been in my life. That's an interesting idea. Mystic is saying maybe an overall plan of f6, e5 with these pawns, making room for the bishop, plus opening the second rank for communication for the black rooks, so they can both defend the king and do attacks and also just see each other. That's a really nice idea, f6 and e5. I do love that. Of course, Jan, yeah. Yeah, first time I met Kostya was a postmortem. Let me see if that's the first time I met Jesse. The first time I saw Jesse play, I was a spectator at a tournament he was playing in. But we didn't really talk. There was a hilarious moment in that tournament where he got so upset. It's one of the most upset I've ever seen a chess player get. Well, I've seen a lot of chess players get a lot of upset, but it was a very especially rageful moment. The first time maybe the very first time I saw Jesse was a game he played against Paragua. You can ask him about his game with Paragua. I'm sure he still remembers it. But I didn't like say anything to him that day. You know, a stranger who was angry. It was probably still like a couple of years till I was good enough to play a game with him. Yeah, Jesse, I might have been introduced to in New Mexico chess circles before I ever played him. I'm not sure. I've known him a lot longer. Did some moves happen? Let's have a look. Probably e5, taking some dark squares. Well, there goes this beautiful idea from Jan, right? Of like f6 and e5. Was that Jan? No, it was Mystic, right? Mystic. Yeah, great idea. So white goes queen f5. Yeah, that's a good square. As central as she can be, still attacking that pawn. She could have also tried to sort of switch angles by going back to d8. But I imagine that Hoki is still kind of concerned about the king, so all things considered, rather keep the queen somewhere with still access to the king side. Okay, that was Cal Chess State Championships, Labor Day 2021 or something. Or 2022. Something like that. San Jose. I've only played like 3 tournaments. I checkmated the opponent like 5 moves later in that last round. That was Jesse's aggressive repertoire. From which side, Spencer? Who do you think wants a queen trade here, white or black? White could put the queen over on the king side. White could offer a trade. White could bring the knight back into the middle. Ooh, white grabs some space with the g-pawn. That's a very nice move, actually. Because this rook was attacking our pawn, and we'd retreated this rook kind of a little passively defending the pawn. Of course, the rook's still doing something, but it's also defending. With g4, we kind of shut that rook out of the game a little bit better, and this rook's got more possibilities to maneuver. That's a strong move for white there. Yeah. Some people say it's hard to play the Najdorf if you don't know a lot of theory. I think there are a lot of lines in the Najdorf that are hard to play if you're not a calculator. But right, the knight actually could have some roots that way, or maybe even that way. Yeah, you can play the Najdorf largely on structures, and I guess it depends what variations you play. There's just some lines in the bishop g5 Najdorf, I guess, most of all, that are very tactical based, depending what you play. Like if you play the poisoned pawn, or if you play the big old main line with bishop e7 where white goes f4, f5, you know, g4 and stuff. Or the Polygaevsky, which I've played a lot. Most of the bishop g5 lines in my opinion, most of them, like black, will have to calculate. But there's probably some lines that buck that trend or that rule. So this is what I expected black to do. Queen g5, because the queen was sort of running out of space. And white avoids the queen trade. Black grabs the pawn. Hokey gamer. Living dangerously. Allows the queen into d8, but there's rook g8 as a response. The queen's now not on h3, on d3. So you can undefend h7 for a moment. Some calculation is being done here a little bit. Black does need to get the rooks to come alive a bit more. One of the main ways to judge positions with rook versus knight or bishop is, you know, are the rooks operating well on an open file? And here they are not yet for black, right? So I guess one theory would be that black should have started transferring the rooks to the d file as soon as possible.